Good evening, class, and welcome to this week's episode of Braid School. Today's lesson is going to cover the basics of feed-in braids. Yes, tonight we're only going to cover the basics for beginners with box braids because trust me, if you can master this concept, you will master more advanced styles later on, like feed-in cornrows and knotless braids, which we will cover in later videos. If you're new to the class, welcome. Class is in session every Monday at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time, and we discuss not only the how to do certain braid techniques, but we discuss the reasons behind the how-tos. So hit that subscribe button so you don't miss valuable information to help you become a better braider. Grab your notes and let's get started. Now, before we get into the actual feed-in portion, I want to quickly cover how to borrow from strand to strand. In order to get a seamless feed-in, you got to have an even braid so it looks nice and neat and will also make the feed-in look less noticeable. Here's an example of what not to do. I started this braid using the 2-strand method where the natural hair is the third leg. Unfortunately, the natural hair strand is not the same size as the other two, so as I go down the braid, it looks lumpy and uneven. Now let's try this again. This time I'm going to pay close attention to the width of each strand as I go down. When I feel that third strand begin to become thinner, I'm going to borrow a very small piece of hair from another strand to even them out. What's most important here is that I'm borrowing from the strand coming around and adding to the strand in the middle. Whenever you borrow, you want to borrow from the underside, never on top of it. You want to continue to grab very small strands as you are adjusting the width of each strand, because if you try to grab larger ones, that's when you run into issues with the strand wrapping around and becoming knotted, and we definitely don't want that. This may seem super time consuming in the beginning, however, once you get the hang of it, it becomes just second nature. So take your time and it's going to come out perfect, I promise. Here's a side by side so you can see the difference in the quality. Now, using the same principles, we're going to apply the same steps to the ends of the braid, because sometimes you come up with an end that is not the same length as the other two. So we're going to do the exact same thing. We're going to bring that shorter one to the middle, and then we're going to borrow from an outside piece to lengthen it up. And that's it. I'm going to keep continuing the same steps until I get as far as I can down to the end of the braid. Now, what you also may be noticing here is the very small frays that are happening here at the bottom. I know some people get super annoyed with them. However, there's not much you can do about the little tiny hairs. So all we do is when we get to the bottom, we're just going to snip them off and trim it up to make it look nice and pretty. And also what we typically do is dip the ends in boiling hot water to smooth out the synthetic hairs, and that is something we'll cover in next week's class on how to seal ends and different ways how to do that. So make sure you hit that subscribe button and catch us next week for that one. So now that we know how to get an even braid, let's make sure we know how to extend the braid, especially if we don't have enough hair to work with. So I'm here at the end of a braid, and now I want to extend it, and I'm going to use a colored piece of hair to clearly show you exactly the placement. I'm placing the hair between the third and second strand as I turn from the outside inward. Here's that step again. I'm taking a very small piece and lining it up with the second and third, and then continuing my rotation of the braid. It's really important to note that I'm using very small pieces of hair to add for the extension. What you don't want to do is add a large piece of hair because it won't create a seamless transition. Instead, you're going to get something more like this. It's going to look like a knot in the middle of the braid, and that's definitely not what you want. Now you may be wondering if size matters if you're only doing a color transition, and the answer is no. As you can see, if I'm just extending this braid with the same color hair, if I'm using the wrong amount of hair to add to it, it looks uneven and unattractive, and girl, that is not what you want. So now that we have mastered getting an even braid and extending the braid, let's put our new skills to the test. What we're going to do now is extend a 20-inch piece of hair to 45 inches while doing a custom color transition from black to gold to blonde. I already have my hair lined up, so let's get started. To help me with the braiding process, I'm going to put a little bit of braid gold on the back of my hand, aka Shine Jam, and of course my model Sheila will be helping me out today. I will leave links to where you can get all of the products and tools used today in the description box below. So I'm starting off a braid as usual, making sure to keep even strand distribution as I go down the braid to make it nice and neat. And then when I get closer to the end, about 5 inches from the bottom, I'm going to start feeding in very small pieces of that golden brown hair. I want to start as small as possible because I want this transition to be as gradual as possible. Watch closely as I still go underneath the turn of the braid and not over the turn of the braid. So now that I have completely transitioned into the solid gold color, I'm now going to start adding very small pieces of the blonde color. So quick side note, as you can see, what I'm doing is a manual ombre. I know a lot of braiding hair comes in different ombre colors. However, they may not always have the color that your client is requesting. So if they don't have it, you got to know how to do this stuff so you don't leave no money on the table, girl. So yeah, keep that in mind. This opens up a wide range of possibilities as far as color combinations go. Again, as we get closer to the bottom, we have little tiny frays that are splitting away from the braid. All we're going to do is just trim those down. And then, of course, when we dip them, it's going to smooth out very nicely and look very pretty. So there you have it. We've got ourselves an ombre braid that measures about 45 inches. And on me, I'm 5'1", so I think that falls about thigh length for me. So that's pretty freaking long. So that's it for this week's session, which means it's now discussion time. Question of the day: how long is too long for you? I know most of my clients don't like them super long because it's not exactly functional. When you have super long braids, especially with like going to the bathroom and whatnot. But I prefer them about medium length since I am of short stature. Oh, and we had a really good question from our tucking video a couple weeks ago. I thought it would be really helpful to share this with everyone. As always, I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you learned something, hit that like button and share it with your friends so I can continue to bring you content just like this. Thanks again for joining today's session, and I will catch you in the next one. Bye.